All right, when you're ready, you're live and you have your time.
Hello.
Hi, John.
Just kind of wondering who's here.
We're just
I
missing
see it.
Mark Davies. Okay, Mark Davies is here. So let's just go ahead and get started. We'll do a roll call. John Rafter,
Here.
Scott Harrington,
Here.
Mark Davies.
Here.
Is there any additions or corrections to the previous minutes?
The minutes weren't ready yet. I put that in my email, so I'm sorry that they're not ready.
Okay. Oh, I see that. All right. First item on the agenda is the teen center contract. Did everybody get an opportunity to read the finance director's narrative about the teen center contract? Is there any committee member that does not want to move this forward to full council for the extension of, I believe it was $13,500 for a 1-year extension?
I'm good with it.
I'm
Mark,
fine
you're
moving
good?
it.
Okay. Hearing no
Yes.
objection? Okay.
There's one question. Do we know anything about the support that the teen center is now in total receiving?
I did not ask him that question, John, but I can follow up with it.
That would be handy because the organization that's funding it is the Fordu, Friends of Recovery. And I don't know if there's been a change in the ratio from the amounts of money we're providing and any other grants now that they're using, just to be sure. There was a time when that was a rescue fund to ensure that there was a movement forward without closing the center. And I know that there's been grants received from Fordu, from the state, and I just want to make sure that with our tough times, if we continue funding and they're fat, so to speak, with their funding, it might be something we could say no to, regrettably.
I will find
Thanks.
out.
So, John, do you want to
No, I'm
Table
fine with this.
Do you want to table this or?
No, I'm fine for voting for it. That would be a question I'd raise regarding the vote. And if we had information on it, then the question might answer itself. If they have a $50,000 now for the teen center, that's a different question.
Okay.
And we could consider just going on with it, but that's the only question. That's the real question I have. How are they doing? How are we doing?
Well, I think that's helpful information that I'm glad that you brought forward. I had no idea that they might have received additional funding to run the teen center. Hearing no more objections or concerns, we'll move on to agenda item B, the surplus items. Did everybody get an opportunity to take a look at the list? Is there any objections to the surplus items? Okay. I had one question, Ginny. I was curious of why the vehicles were not on the list at this time.
There is one vehicle on the list, Len. The other vehicles that we're surplusing right now have been previously approved. They were approved earlier in the year before George had left, and also with council motion in March. But because of COVID, we had suspended all activities for our surplus sales because we didn't want to have the exchange in person. And now we have set up safeguards so we can move that forward. So there are several vehicles down at Central Garage that are currently on the auction list, and they're on the website.
I guess I missed them because I was looking at it because Delene and I walked on the Greenway Trail last week and I saw quite a few vehicles, and I guess I'm not seeing vehicles listed, and that's why I was, other than the dump truck, that's the only thing that I saw.
Well,
I mean, there's quite a few vehicles down there now.
yes, and those vehicles that are down there outside of the dump truck that's on today's list were already approved by either George or by council earlier this year.
Okay.
Those are currently on the surplus sale auction, and if you go to that link, you'll see all of them there listed.
Oh, okay. They're already on there. Okay.
Yep, they're already listed. Yep.
Okay. Is there any other questions, comments, or concerns? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to the OPT bus contracts, Suny, Hartford, and Hillside.
Yeah, I'll start on that, Len. I've had a number of meetings with David Hoteling and Chief Brenner to talk about buses running to campus and back under the current circumstances. The concerns that have been raised include not having overcrowding of buses to facilitate transmission of disease, as well as looking out for the safety of the drivers and not putting the drivers in a position of having to get up out of their seat to confront students who are not wearing masks, or to be the one to try to prevent too many students from entering the bus because it would exceed the capacity that we're trying to maintain. So due to those very real concerns, it was decided that it would be in our best interest to not provide evening transportation to the campuses this year, just daytime. Last run would leave the campus at 6 p.m. Needless to say, the Student Association is not happy with that. They would like to see evening runs to downtown. I will say that we agreed, and I communicated to President Morris that we would consider providing evening runs if we had some support from University Police, from the University Police Department. The support that we requested would be at least one University Police officer at the downtown loading station on Friday and Saturday evenings to assist in making sure that the students are remaining appropriately separated while waiting for the bus, that helps limit the number of students that enter the bus, and helps to ensure that the students are wearing masks. My request was turned down. The college and UPD denied my request to provide that assistance. So based upon that, we're moving forward with David negotiating with the Student Association to provide bus service, but ending at 6 p.m. And we also are agreeing that whatever contract we enter into this year would be on a month-to-month basis so that we can reassess as we go on. Nobody knows what will happen on a month-to-month basis. Things may get better, things may get worse. And that gives us an opportunity to sit down with the students once a month to reassess the contract and the service we're providing.
So
David,
Gary,
anything- I'm sorry.
am
go
I
ahead.
understanding this correctly, Gary, that you and David are negotiating with the Student Association, not with the president of the college? That's who we actually contract with?
I'm not negotiating. David's doing the negotiating. We do not contract with the college. We contract with the Student Association. The college stays out of it. They don't want any part of it. We always work directly with the Student Association. However, because this is not normal times, I wanted to discuss it with the college president and let them know we had real serious concerns. You know, one of the things I said was if you look at the college plan, they would never, ever even consider permitting 50 students and one staff person in a 10 by 30 room that's poorly ventilated. But yet that's what we would be doing with a bus. And I did say we would consider evening runs, but we would need some support from UPD, and they said they would not provide that support.
I have just an observation. If on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, there was not any bus runs, there would be much more walking back up to the campus, which means that the Ho Chi Minh Trail would be open again. So I'm just concerned about the impact, unintended consequence of not providing these things, fully aware that these that the drivers and conditions on the bus could be kind of difficult unless we found some other way of dealing with spacing and then dealing with the assumption of rational adults getting on board or off.
Yeah, you're right, John, and we had a long discussion about that. Here's where the discussion came out. One is we talked about providing transportation till 9 p.m., not till our usual 1 a.m., 2 a.m., because we don't want to put the message out that we're facilitating late nights at the bars. Both the chief and David Hoteling brought up the point that we would be providing transportation downtown if we did that, but not return to campus. So we'd be working against ourselves. The other thing is we really believe that the greatest problem is going to be the house parties. They're going to be the ones that are hard to monitor, hard to enforce, and hard to control. So overall, some bad things are going to happen. This is not a good situation. There is no complete fix to this. But in discussion with David and discussion with the police chief, it was felt that the lesser of two evils was not to provide the bus service. And now, David, please, join in.
No, I agree. We had talked about running it till 9 o'clock, and like you said, we would get them stranded downtown. It would just create more of a bottleneck down there, and then people would be coming back up, even more people later in the evening. I'm having a hard enough time finding drivers to cover these runs, and without any safeguards for them, this makes it very difficult.
And just an overcrowded bus with students who have been drinking and one driver is just everything we're trying to avoid. It goes against everything we're trying to do, sends the wrong message. And again, we were willing to consider running till 9 p.m. with some little assistance from UPD. I was very disappointed with the position that they took, that was not something that they saw worth their time.
Dave, what time does the bus runs normally stop on a normal day when college isn't around?
When college is not around,
Yeah, like tonight, say I jump on a bus, what's the last time that the bus normally stops?
right now, 6:30.
Sounds good to me. So we're just keeping in line with what we're doing now.
Correct.
And Dave, we're not really going to take a financial hit on this per se because you were reimbursed by, was it FEMA? I forget which organization.
CARES Act money. That's
CARES Act.
FTA.
So we're not going to take a loss on this, correct?
Ginny?
Correct. We will not be experiencing a loss because whatever revenue loss that we do experience from not collecting the funds from the Student Association will be covered by the CARES Act.
And this is really what the CARES Act money is for, to replace lost revenue because of COVID.
Is there any other concerns that committee members have? Mark?
Mostly just a statement. I mean, hearing John's point, it seems though that the opportunity is there to be able to think about this one way or another with that month-to-month agreement. That if there seemed like there was a need to increase the hours and it could be done safely, that could be renegotiated the next month. But if it was working as we think it might, we hope it might, then we stay with it. So I think that month-to-month provides us with the outlet to be able to change it, to be able to accommodate the situation as it occurs.
Len, I got something, Len.
Yeah.
In the way of concern, if we stop our bus at 6:30, whatever the time was, I don't remember. Have we had any conversations with our taxi services between the city and our taxi services with the police department stuff about, we definitely don't want to start seeing them get overloaded like we've seen so many times on a Friday, Saturday night where they put them in there like sardines, and see if we can get the taxi services to work with the concept too. Because if we're going to try to make the statement bus wise, I think we also have to have taxi services on board as well, because we can load downtown just as quick with taxis doing round robin as we can with a bus. Just a thought out there.
I think that's a very good point that you make, Scott. And I think we have to hold, just like we hold restaurants and bars and businesses responsible, we have to hold the taxis responsible as well for not overcrowding. So that's a good message that OPD can put out to the taxi companies. I think it's a good point to make.
Something that's a maybe back burner, we have time with it. I think citizens in Oneonta may need to have, it might be helpful for the party scene and any other disruption, that people are informed that they should be very comfortable contacting and be eyes and ears regarding improper parties that endanger people. So I know the police have been are very responsive, I believe, to these kinds of calls from folks, but I'm not sure that people are I don't know that there's a lot of reluctance that I remember of people calling the police. So somehow,
John, that is a good point, John. And I had a conversation. First of all, I don't think this year people are going to be reluctant. And I usually preach tolerance to the young people, and this year I'm not preaching tolerance. But I had a conversation with the police chief this morning and with David Merzig. What we are going to do is we are going to meet to talk about what is enforceable and how we're going to enforce it, and then communicate to the entire community because there's a lot of confusion on that. I was walking the dog 2 days ago. A woman drove up in the car alongside of me, stopped her car and said, "Oh, are you the mayor?" I tried to say I wasn't, but it didn't work. She said, "Well, there's some college students down the street, having a party on their lawn." I said, "How many are there?" She says, "I don't know, 4 or 6. I said, they have the same rights that your family does if they live together, to have a get together in their backyard. So she says, "Well, I'm really worried and concerned about this, and afraid." I said, "I understand that, we all are." So we need to communicate with the students, with the college, and with the entire community as to what's allowed, what's not allowed, what we can enforce, what we can't enforce, and how we will go about enforcing it. So I think that's going to be a very important part, because there's a lot of confusion now as to what you are permitted to do and not permitted to do, and what can be enforced and what can't be enforced. So that's a really important part of this.
So David, am I to assume that you've already finalized the contract? Because according to the narrative, it says that you'll have a contract ready for the August 4th council meeting. And if so, does that number for the contract, does that represent what, does it have parity with what you've received in years prior?
We have no contract ready to submit as of right now. We just had the first conversations with the SA about 5:30 tonight, and a response to the mayor's email today. So this is just getting going.
Okay.
Clarify, in the narrative line, I said if contracts were ready by August 4th, I would email them to you.
Okay.
And just to add to it, we would take the same, whatever schedule we use for Suny campus, we'll use for Hartford campus, and also for what's the name of the independent operation up there?
Hillside.
Hillside Commons. We'll use the same schedule for all 3.
Okay. Good luck, David. Moving on to agenda D, the Glenwood Creek Culvert project. I guess Jenny, you and Greg have more info.
Greg, did you want to start, or would you like me to chat?
You can go right ahead, Jenny. I think unless anyone has any questions about the scope of work or anything like that we discussed last time. We talked about, in the meantime, we've talked about how we might fund the city's portion of the project, which is what, $368,000 and change. And I think I'll let Jenny jump in at that point.
Okay. Right. I looked at a bit possible available sources between all of the different street projects that Greg has on the schedule and our CHIPS aid and excess funds from previous capital projects. And we found about $85,000 that could possibly be available. We also looked at the streets and sidewalks reserve. Right now, we're estimating that we've got about 1.7 million in that, but we've earmarked that for the Lettuce Highway capital project that hopefully will be coming soon. And so looking at all of our different options, we thought that if we go through with this, probably our best bet would be to do a bond resolution for the balance and include it in the West Street project. The West Street project is going to be an expensive street project, and we could just roll it into that bond. That way we're not depleting our streets and sidewalks reserve. We'll have that money available for the Lettuce Highway project. And even with the $85,000, we could reserve that for contingency type items for other street projects. So that would be a recommendation, because we don't want to deplete all of our other street funding to be able to fund the culvert.
So Jenny, if I'm correct to understand this, you want to bond out the 1.058 million?
No, the 368,000, just the city portion.
Oh, the 370. Okay, all right. Sorry, thank you. Is there any other questions, comments, or concerns from committee members?
Yeah, Jenny, when do you expect that bond project to go out on the West Street project?
That, Greg, you can answer that question better than myself, but I think that's for next year, is it not?
Yeah, that'll be part of our budget discussion this year. I've got it. It's on the capital plan for 2021. But that's going to be something that the council will have to discuss as part of this upcoming budget process as to whether they want to do that project in 2021 or not.
Greg, and just to follow up on that, would that still work with the timeline that was kind of established moving forward with the Glenwood project?
Well,
Not-
Greg, if you don't mind if I jump in here, I think I understand your question, Mark. Are you thinking about the timing of the cash flow?
Right.
With the 368,000, I do not feel any discomfort as far as carrying that until we're ready to do the bonding, even if West Street went out for a couple more years, because we've got a strong enough fund balance where we would be able to carry that.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, Jenny. Appreciate it.
Well, I
Scott?
guess I'm going to be a different way. I feel very uncomfortable. We're talking about going into a budget. We're talking about possible bonding. I was looking at my copy of the budget the other night with looking at what's projected at what people want to spend and the bonding and stuff like that. And then we're talking about putting another bond on top of it. But we could push out West Street. Well, West Street's been pushed out many, many years. And if you haven't driven it lately, I'm not sure we can really push West Street out at all, especially with the gas pipe that they just put through there, and they try to put blacktop in with the concrete and the way it's settling. And I understand the scope of this. I understand the importance of it. I also understand the importance of trying to keep things going. I'm just very, very, very uneasy, especially with this budget year and everything we just gone through, and the fact that we've been dipping into our reserves. We keep talking about we can do this and we can do that, and we can bond this and we can bond that, and eventually all these payments start adding up. I mean, it's like, you got to kind of look at it like when you buy a new car, and then your wife goes out and buys a new car, and then so you let your daughter or your son buy a new car and you're paying for it. This all starts adding up over the long run. Plus, we still have to figure out how we're going to put money back into our reserve funds at the same time as we're doing the budget. So there's just so much going on. I really do not feel comfortable. I understand the urgency of doing certain things. I understand that, hey, we're getting a good portion of this paid for, but also we still have to stop and think about, sometimes we have to think about what projects need to be a priority versus which ones don't. And just because we're giving money up front doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea to always take it, especially if we're talking about bonding out more monies. So, I mean, like I said, I'm very, very uncomfortable about when we start to talk about more bonding and stuff like that. So that's just my 2 cents, Lynn.
Okay. John?
Yeah, I think Scott makes a good point, having a big picture in terms of our larger projects, where the monies may come from. I know that West Street has been neglected and perhaps even more actively compromised lately. It is an important street, and where will we go next with that particular throughway? So Scott was just suggesting, I believe, that we get some larger perspective on what our major projects are likely to be. And we will have to make choices. At the same time, we may be stuck with the fact that we have such infrastructure needs that we can't wait. So that's my point. Mute.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I think having an understanding of the big picture is important. But I want to add that I think I heard it pretty clearly from Greg the last meeting that we had, that the supports from this on this particular culvert have been undercut, and that safety is in question. For me, that becomes a higher priority than some of the other projects that might just make it more aesthetically pleasing or is easier to drive down the road on. I don't see those other issues as being such safety issues. So that's where I'm looking at, the safety issue being the most important thing here.
Just to say, from my perspective, a likely point for a major accident and fatality is really around Hartwick and West Street. Line turns, unpainted lines. It means that's all. I'll leave it to Scott to amplify that because he drives that quite a bit.
So Greg, why don't you
Greg,
just highlight the committee or let the committee members know in your list of priorities, where is the West Street project and the Glenwood project? You told us the Glenwood project, if I remember correctly, was way up near the top.
That's a tough question because I don't have a ranking of projects at 1 through any number. I think both of these are important projects. West Street, as you pointed out, as a group, it's an important street. It's a high priority road, a lot of traffic, and it has been a long time since that's been done. There's also some utility work that ought to be done there as well. That's obviously a big chunk of money, much bigger than the Glenwood project, but as Mark said, as I explained last time, there are some structural deficiencies with that culvert. And I can't say if that's, how quickly that might progress and get worse. And at some point we're going to have to replace it. I cannot tell you how soon that will be in the future. Certainly DOT and our consultant is not saying that there's a threat of imminent failure of the culvert, but there are some yellow flags, if you will. It's tough to gauge, the way I see it, and I think I still see it this way, despite the financial concerns, is that we have the opportunity to use this grant to offset a major portion of the cost is hard to pass up when I don't believe we'll ever get that again. I shouldn't say ever, but I don't see a future near-term, medium-term grant coming our way. But ultimately, how you spend the city's money is up to the council. And I do see the concerns that you guys are expressing.
If I could just add, Greg, I don't get a vote on this, but I do want to say that I know it's not what Greg wants to hear. But don't rate this as high as some of the priorities. I know we'll be giving up a grant, but the reality is that that current culvert can go for another 20, 30 years. We don't know that it won't. There's no guarantee that it will. We have a lot of really pressing needs right now. West Street is one, but another thing is next week, you're going to hear a presentation from our consultant who is working on the parking garage and transit hub project. Now, again, we have grants to cover that, both the rehabilitation of the parking garage, which is an absolute necessity, must happen, and the construction of the transit hub. You can be sure that the grants will not cover the full amount, and you will be probably asked to bond the balance. So I think Len said, or maybe Scott said, it's important to be able to see the big picture of everything that's going to be on the table before making these kind of decisions. So I think that's an important thing to ask for. What are all the potential things coming up that are going to be important projects that we have to consider, and so we can really rate them as to which of the ones that we need to fund most importantly right now.
I can never. Just from Greg, how much time do we have to discuss this with the grant and the loss of the grant?
The New York State DOT asked if we could have an answer by the end of July. I asked them if August 4th council meeting would be acceptable, and they said, okay. I don't think we have much longer than that before they get a little impatient.
So is there any finance committee member that doesn't see the reason why we'll elevate this, move it forward to the full council so that we can have this discussion? Because I'm like Scott, I want to hear about all of these projects. I'm concerned about how much of this we're going to have to bond moving through the 21, 22, and 23 building season. So I would like the full council to be able to talk about this, and that would also give an opportunity to Jenny and Greg to kind of get a look at all the projects that they want to do in the next 2 years, and how are we going to finance them? We just can't do them all. And I'm sorry, Greg, I thought you had rated these projects, so my apologies.
That's okay. I just mean I haven't specifically ordered them, and it's just there's a lot of variables.
Okay. Is there any objection from a committee member of moving this up to full council for discussion? Hearing none, it'll move forward then. We'll move on to item E, which is the budget transfer. Did everybody get an opportunity to take a look at the budget transfers? Or are there any questions on the first portion about the sidewalks? It looks like we're not outsourcing as much. We're doing more in-house work, and they need to have some money transferred. Does anybody have a problem with that? Scott? Mark? All right, hearing none, we'll move that portion forward to the full council. As you all know, I had some questions about the latter portion of this narrative. Greg, I got to be honest with you, I got hung up this afternoon, and I did not get an opportunity to read your email that you sent us this afternoon. Can you just take a minute and just kind of break down for this committee the benefits to the taxpayers of the city of Oneonta to spend money on looking at the ribonucleic acid content of our wastewater system?
Yeah, so it's really a matter of public health, you know, and hopefully protecting the public health. So there are some studies that have been done in trials, and this is in use in Europe. And there's a lot of trials going on in the United States now. I know the state of Utah already has implemented this to some extent, and Syracuse University in the state of New York, in partnership with Suny ESF and the Upstate Medical Center, are working on researching what benefit can you get from monitoring the wastewater. So they monitor the wastewater for COVID-19 RNA, which is basically indicating the prevalence of the virus upstream. So anyone that's contributing to that wastewater stream, which is what we call the sewer shed, you can get an idea by looking at a baseline. You know, we figure out how much RNA is in the wastewater stream now, and then we can track that over time. And if we see a change, like a spike, for instance, then that might indicate that there is more prevalence of the virus upstream. More people have the virus. What's been shown in these studies overseas and other places in the United States is that you'll tend to see a spike in the RNA a week or so before you see a spike in positive confirmed cases in the community. So what you do with that information could be, when you see that spike in RNA, you might share that with the community. You might share that with the county department of health. There might be some directions to the community as to social distancing, and maybe some events don't happen that otherwise would happen. That all needs to be figured out and determined, that exact process and how that's going to happen, who makes those decisions. I know the Syracuse team is hoping, and I think they have approval from the state to do kind of a trial in certain regions. I think they'd like to make this part of the state's dashboard and how they make decisions. That's kind of what they've done in Utah. I think that's how they've done things in Europe. So it's just another tool for public health decision making. So I think it's something that's worthwhile to look into to get some more information about, especially with college students coming back. We have a baseline of data now, how prevalent is the virus, and then we see things, if they start spiking when students come back, then that can inform both the city and the county department of health and the colleges as to perhaps taking some action to try to curtail that. And I should mention that SUNY Oneonta is also looking at this to implement specifically on their campus to give them a little bit more granular view of just their campus as opposed to our entire sewer shed.
Any questions from, go ahead, Jenny.
And also, just to let you know, the original request that I wrote in my narrative was for $20,000. That was the original quote from the company. But Greg updated the estimate in his email just to go through the end of December, which is a little under 11,000. So we could reduce the transfer from 20 down to 11.
Okay. Mark, John, or John, you look like you got a question.
Yeah, I do. Greg, what is how sophisticated can our identification of a source be? For example, if SUNY decides to do this, obviously they'd be having a point where they were testing the water. Is that correct?
Yeah, so in the case of SUNY's campus, there are 2 points coming off the campus. All of their wastewater is coming into our system that ultimately goes to our wastewater plant.
Okay, so SUNY would have 2 holes it would be pouring water through and testing what was coming through. Is that correct?
That's the idea.
And maybe they would tell us?
We're working with them. They've already, I think they're ready to proceed on their end, but we're both still figuring out as we go. But we've had some communication. It seems to be an open dialogue. I don't see why they would not share that with us and vice versa. But ultimately,
I don't either, but surprises are creepy.
yeah.
The other thing is how sensitive will we be if we implement something like this in terms of locating neighborhoods or zones of the city that we're testing?
We would just be looking at, we'd be testing the influent of the wastewater plant. That's our entire sewer shed. So the entire city, the parts of the town, south side and the west end, that contribute. So it's in watching the webinar, I did include the link there if anyone was really interested in learning a lot more detail about this. You could watch that webinar that's shared. They talk about, they really don't recommend getting much smaller than the size of a zip code or a city area or maybe like a campus.
Oh, sure.
This
I
is
was just wondering how precise it might be.
Yeah, I mean, you could conceivably sample from anywhere. You could sample a manhole in the east end of town and try to, or a few of them and try to isolate an area. But we don't think that that's worthwhile at this point. It's more of a thing because you can't say that, there might be more people on the east end that have it, but they're going to be moving about. And so.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Mark,
one question that comes up, Greg, is let's say we detect an increase, but we're not, and let's say the colleges say they're not detecting an increase, so which means it's a community increase. What do we do with that information? What actions are at our disposal to do? How does it benefit in a practical way?
That's the key question, Gary, and it's a good one because that's I don't have the answer to that yet. That's something that we need to develop with the County Department of Health. I think I don't think that the mayor or the council could necessarily tell the city we got to go on lockdown. That's more of what the regional control room is doing, and the County Department of Health would probably have a role in that if there were any specific actions. So I think that's all to be determined, and I understand that saying we want to spend $10,000 and not really know what we're going to get out of it is a cause for question. But I think we kind of need the data in order to be able to make any sort of determination. And also I should say that by going the route we're going, we'll have the researchers at Syracuse, that group who is obviously focusing on this issue across the state to help advise us in how to make decisions, whatever those decisions might be. So I can't really expound much further at this point.
Right. So for me, I'm at the same point where Gary is, and that's why I called it out earlier today. I just don't see what you're going to do with it, the information later on. And at this point, I don't know if we just sit back and watch Syracuse or these other communities and see what they do with it. I mean, if you're basically saying that you can't separate the city out maybe into the different wards and know which ones has a higher level of the acid, then we don't really know what we're going to do with the information afterwards. We don't know what but Heidi Bond's going to do with the information. We don't know what kind of precautions it would kick in. I don't know. At this point for me, I just don't see the valuation of it.
Len, if I could jump in, I didn't get a chance to watch the video. I was trying to do that when I was listening on the planning board, and I just don't think I have enough information at this point to make any kind of decision with this. This is, kudos to Greg. This is like cutting edge technology here, and I just don't think I had enough time to get brought 100% up on speed with it. Is this something that we could maybe revisit in the committee on our next meeting, or maybe he'd have a little bit more information, and maybe we'll have time to talk with Heidi from the county and see if this is even something that they would even be able to use or not use or anything like that.
We can do whatever you want. I know the county hadn't heard of this until we brought it to their attention, so they're interested and certainly on board and learning about it with us. Obviously it's in development in New York State. The fact that Syracuse is researching this and trying to figure out, along with a lot of other universities and researchers around the world. But it has been demonstrated in other places that you get a 1-week warning of an increase in cases in your community by monitoring the wastewater. So although I can't say right now exactly what would come of that, I do think something valuable can come of that information. I just can't. I'm not a public health professional. Maybe we should have asked Diane Georgeson, our public health officer or city health officer to join us for this conversation. She could probably add her perspective, and that would be helpful.
That's a good point, Greg, because Diane is a big proponent of this system. She's quite, she supports this strongly. So I think it'd be important to hear from her as to the value she sees in it.
Yeah, maybe have her come back on the next finance meeting. Maybe she can join us and she can discuss it with us.
Mark, what do you think?
I certainly think there's some value in getting a week's head start on the virus. The question everyone's raising is exactly that. I think is the big issue is what happens with that week head start. Who does that inform? What process does that kick into place? How might this work with the county level, the state level? I think those would be important decisions or important questions to understand because it seems like it would be good to get that week head start. And then on that point of the head start, I was going to ask more of a kind of small picture question. And Greg, you might not even be able to answer this, but I'd like to know what the turnaround time is going to be from Syracuse. So if we have tested this and shipped it up to them, how long does it take to get the results back? Because then we might lose that week's head start. So I'd want to make sure that we had that had a good turnaround time. They weren't getting so inundated that they couldn't process the test they needed to process. So I guess that's more of a small level, but on a big level, yes. What again, useful tool? How would it inform? And to put another direction on it, maybe we can become advocates for this being part of that dashboard. Herzig, you're on the on that regional control panel. Is there a way to be able to advocate for this type of process that this might somehow inform that?
I thought about bringing that up, but and I certainly can. I can tell you that questions that pertain to unknowns or what's going to happen in 3 weeks from now are really not being addressed because everybody is so overwhelmed coming up with the answers to questions of decisions that have to be made that affect today and tomorrow. If I bring it up, what I'll probably be told is if the city wants to do it, there's nothing bad about that. And if something could come of it, go right ahead. But I'm sure that, unfortunately, where we're at right now is all of the energy and attention and resources goes into getting through the week. And it's hard to get questions answered of anything beyond that.
Go ahead, Ginny.
Just to let the committee know, I have put a request into FEMA to find out if this would be covered in our FEMA claim. And our representative is researching it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I guess, Greg, if I get an understanding from the committee, we're not killing it by any means. It just sounds like there needs to be more information, whether it's coming from our Diana Georgeson or our county health, Heidi Bond. It just seems like there needs to be some more information on the valuation of what we can do with this information.
Glenn, I would suggest that we ask Diane to discuss it with Heidi, and then for Diane to come to the next meeting and present both the value she sees in it, as well as what she heard from Heidi Bond in her discussion with Heidi.
That would be
Can I
great.
make one suggestion?
Go ahead, Greg.
Could we proceed with some of our currently budgeted money in one of our other codes to do a few baseline tests, because our window of opportunity is the next 4 weeks before the college students return, 3 weeks. If we don't have any sort of a baseline, then if we start seeing, we won't really have anything to compare to. That would be committed to the entire.
I don't think this committee gets that granular with your monies. You must have $200 that you can, right? Test costs $200 each, $20 shipping. So I'm sure you must have $220 somewhere. You're not asking this committee to approve that, are you?
I'm just being transparent that I would like to go forward with samples tested per week for basically the time until college comes back, and see if we can find that.
I sincerely doubt there's a committee member here that's going to say no to you spending $220 to get some data for now. Why we wait for Diana and Heidi to confer on what to do with the data.
Okay.
Is there anybody that's saying no to spending $220? Okay.
No, I agree with Greg. Establishing a baseline would be important. Just really quickly aside, Greg, I thought you were going to respond to one of the questions I raised about turnaround time. Was that the case, or?
Yeah, the proposal from the lab is 2 business days from receipt of samples. So we would take the sample, overnight it to them, and get that back within 2 business days. We'd like to sample twice per week, so probably Monday and Thursdays that we'd be sending samples.
Thank you. Then it obviously would become even more of a tool for real-time analysis.
If
John?
I may,
Go ahead, John.
I'd be fine with Greg proceeding with that, but I'm also an advocate of thought experiments, which is, imagine we got a certain kind of data and then asking ourselves, what would we do with that? And we could get a bit ahead of this with certain, and that would be it. What would we do? Which I think is the point that's been made. We now have information. What action can we take based on that information?
Right, and that's been the resounding question throughout this 25-minute discussion. But to Greg's point, before another potential 7,000 individuals become community members. So
if we get one positive DNA versus 30, and we don't know quite where they're coming from, what do we do with that information? Is it presumptive that we should be in shutdown, et cetera, based on what may be a predictive indicator, or we have a lot of people who don't show symptoms?
Right.
Okay, we can play with it. We probably wouldn't want to announce the data to the public.
Right. Go ahead, Mark.
I think Greg kind of hinted at it a little bit. I mean, I'm just trying to think of how would it benefit us, even if it doesn't benefit us regionally. And maybe it is at that very simple level. We pull back on particular events that we're going to offer because we've seen the spike. Whatever it might be, we limit our transportation even further, whatever it might be. But there might be ways that it could inform us internally that could help us to make a good informed decision.
Sure.
I think that's a great point. I think that could be handled with a thought experiment, and Greg can go ahead with this. But this is an easy thing to think through and go linearly and say, what do we do? And we could do that earlier than later. So that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Len, I just want to clarify something with Greg. Greg, you're not looking for just one test, correct? To get your baseline, you're probably going to require 4 to 6 tests.
Yeah, we'll do several weeks of it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be able to find that within our existing budget.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear in case you guys see more bills than just $220.
Mark,
Greg, the baseline issue, I think.
just a second. Gary.
Baseline issue.
Go ahead.
I don't
Mark
mean
had his hand up. Go ahead, Mark.
I don't mean to belabor the point here in terms of trying to understand this, but Greg, is there any problem if we did wait to get more information to our next finance meeting, which is obviously in 2 weeks, and then the meeting after that? So 3 weeks from now, I guess would be our next council meeting, and that is probably right on the eve of the students coming back. Is there any dangers if we were? I know we don't understand fully how we use this, but do you see any drawbacks if we were to wait that long to be utilizing this?
No, I think getting the data, if we're able to go forward with that now, is probably the key for me right now. I think to take a few more weeks and discuss it more, have a better idea of how we'll use that data is good. But at least being able to get the data now would be helpful. I think the sooner we figure this all out, the better, of course, but it is a developing kind of situation. I mean, I guess the way I see it is, you read in the paper or online or whatever about how many new cases are there, and those new cases, when they're tested positive and they're confirmed, those are people that had this, they got it 2 weeks ago potentially. So there's that lag in the data coming in as to how we gauge how infected is our community. So this just gives us a little bit better advantage, ability to know a little bit sooner and communicate that to the public if there is some kind of a spike, and then people can adjust their actions accordingly, and maybe you help slow the spread. That's the way I see it.
Okay. Jenny, I believe that covers everything on your narrative.
Yes.
Okay. I believe there was a request by our personnel director for a executive session. Katie, are you on?
I'm here, yeah.
Hey, Len, right before that, are we going to do the computer program first?
Oh, right. Before we go into executive session, thank you. And I have it highlighted here too. The mayor asked us to add the city website to our agenda in the planning committee meeting just an hour ago. It was approved to go with, the name is escaping me. A vendor was chosen to be our new host for city website. I apologize. Let me pull up the details. Does anybody have that information real quick? Go ahead.
Revise.
Kevin. Revise, but what's the total amount? 27?
So the total amount would be $28,300. That's over a 5-year period. So
Right.
$14,000, $700 price tag for base, about $3,400 in maintenance per 4 years to get us to the 5 years, because the $3,400 is included in the first year, for a grand total of $28,300.
Right. And have you spoken to Ginny about what line item you were going to pull the money from?
I have not, no. My presumption would be that we would allot money to the existing hosting fund and just allocate it from there. But we've not had any conversations about it.
Okay. Gary, your thoughts on this right now?
No, I'd ask Ginny where the money's coming from. I don't know. Ginny?
Well, we do have some money in the budget for website hosting. We had $12,000 in the budget for 2020. Half the year's gone by, so we've probably got about 6,000 left. But Carrie and I can look at the final numbers And I can have a budget transfer ready for council next week.
Okay.
This
Is there any committee member that doesn't want to move this forward? This is a line item that we've been talking about for 6-7 months now. Does anybody not feel comfortable in moving this forward to full council? No? Okay. We have thumbs up. The item will move to full council. Carrie, you work with Ginny and figure out the budget transfer. It might be helpful, Carrie, if you send out that report that you gave to the planning committee. If you gave that out to all of the council members, it would be very comprehensive for them to understand that you did a great job in the comparison of the two vendors.
Thank you. I'll send that out this evening.
Okay. So I guess we're back to the executive session that was being called for by the personnel director. Katie, if you wanted to take over now, that'd be great.
I think we would be looking for a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss retirement incentives for 2 specific employees.
Is there a committee member that would like to give the motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel issues? Mark, is there a second? Scott. Carrie, can you set us up to go into executive session to discuss personnel issues?
I can. Here you go.
I believe we're all here. We were all teleported.
I'm just gonna say Star Trek.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that was the last item on the agenda.
I believe so.
Can I get a motion
I
for
make a
adjournment?
motion, we can adjourn.
Okay, second. Mark, cool. All right, everybody, have a good night.
Have a good